and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show, coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m, broadcasting on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on TikTok. And folks, we've got another great show lined up for you this evening. We have got a guest coming on at 7:30. It's the ever-interesting, much respected Niall Fraser, who's been on before and who was out with us on Saturday the 24th, just past. It was a busy day, and there's Niall there. He'll be coming on at 7:30, so stick around for that, and he's going to be telling us about his ideas and how he thought the Humza's convention on hopelessness went. And that was the so-called convention where the faithful, which is an ever-dwindling number now, faithful of SNPers turned up to be lectured at on how best to mess up the United Kingdom and to cause serious problems for all the normal people. So they were huddled together away from the good people of Dundee in the Caird Hall, and we turned up at 9:30 just to give them a piece of our mind. And we've got some videos of that, and we've got some pictures of that, which we'll get to. Also coming up just before the bottom of the hour, we have got our weekly competition, and the winner will get this tin of sweeties, and the tin is branded the Coronation of His Majesty King Charles III. And not only that, but we're going to throw in some Lincoln tea and coffee, which is branded by the Royal Air Force Typhoon display team. So that's basically Royal Air Force Typhoon display team coffee. You'll get some of that with your sweeties as well. That's coming up at 7, just before the bottom of the hour. So folks, how are you tonight? Please do send in your greetings. Please do send in your thoughts. What do you think about Humza's intention to use the British general election next year as some kind of de facto referendum, by which is meant some kind of, in practice, a referendum, to translate it from the Latin? And is that going to be his downfall? Or what is going to happen regarding that? Tell us what you think there. Let's say hello to some folk. Derek was first in tonight. Derek says his dad's home from hospital, so glad it's good news. Hope your dad's going to be okay, Derek, and I hope that you're okay as well. Niall, our guest, says it's going to be another good one tonight. It absolutely is. Debbie says, good evening, everyone. And Harry says, evening AFFG and Unionists everywhere. Hope you're well. It's certainly great here in the county of West Sussex. Hello, Kat. Hope things are well with you. And to Stuart from Elgin. Stuart likes the t-shirt. Thank you, Stuart. It's by a company called David Watts, which I don't know if they're still in business, but I got this a few years ago, and it's lying rampant over a Union Jack. It's certainly unique. I've never seen anyone with such a t-shirt before. Stephen says, good evening from Belfast, and a wonderful British evening to all fellow Unionists, from Christopher. Hi, Catherine, and hello to Ryan from the West Riding of Yorkshire. Kathy, good evening, and D Stanners, nice to see you, Jack, also. And Kathy, hope you're enjoying the show, Kathy. And Miss Missy says, I hope you're all keeping well. Good crowd in the house tonight. Well, let's talk about Saturday's event. Now, on the 24th, the Scottish Nationalists were having a march in Stirling. So we had a team in Stirling to count them, to film them, in order that we could do a proper count. And we put the film up of them on our YouTube page, and you'll find that in that link in the comment thread. And of course, we have to be there in order to ensure that the Scottish Nationalists don't lie about the numbers. And of course they did lie about the numbers. They said there was 5,000 on it. But as you'll see from our excellent video, it took exactly 8 minutes to pass our counting point, and it was very strung out, so it's very easy to count, and it will take you just 8 minutes to count. And there's 965 there. You might get one or two different from us, but that's the number that we counted, 965. So that's 5 times less than what they were saying, and it's 5 times less than the lie that the Sunday National printed. And you know, it really is time, as we've been saying for so long, for the British media to pick them up on that, because we're providing the evidence. We're providing the evidence, and it's irrefutable evidence. It's film evidence. You cannot literally refute it. Anyway, we're going to be continuing to do that, but that was a really good piece of activism that our Stirling team did, so thank you to the folk who sorted that one out. Meanwhile, another team of 12 of us, we rocked up outside the Caird Hall, which is that big hall in the central square of Dundee, named after James Caird, a Jute baron, in memory of him. And it seats 2,000, but there was an awful lot of seats empty. Almost all of upstairs was empty, and downstairs was just scattered. I'm not going to give an estimation of the number of people, except that the number of people that we were addressing outside the Caird Hall probably just numbered around about 200 or so. 250 at the most. And let's tell you all about that. So the doors were due to open at 10 o'clock, and the meeting was due to start at 10:30. So we got ready and we met our activists at 9:45, and at 9:45 we started to regale the assembled throng of around a couple of hundred standing outside waiting to get in. And we had our flags, and we had posters, and I had the megaphone, and I had prepared a 15-minute spiel of jokes, basically, at the expense of Hapless Humza and his humongous haul of hopelessness. I'd have to say the jokes actually went down very well, and the nationalists, although they were also shouting at us, they were also laughing at the jokes, I'm glad to say. And you know, it was fairly good. Let's throw up the first video that we've got. It's pretty loud, okay? So let's throw up this one. Well, that's a photograph there, and that was our photograph of, well, it's pretty self-explanatory, our SNP Out Now flag, which you'll see in the background. And the thing there in the back says Convention on Independence, Saturday the 24th of June. So it was fairly clear where we stand on that particular convention. Let's throw up the first video if we can.
I want to make sure that the people will decide, and we know that the people decide, because the people decide, the sovereign people of Scotland always decide. The sovereign people of Scotland always decide at our local elections, at our national elections, and at our state elections. What do you want? Independence! What do you want? What do you want? Independence! What do you want? What do you want? Independence! What do you want? Independence! What do you want? What do you want? What do you want?
God save the King! God save the King! Let us vote! All these veterans are dying care homes. What team do you support?
Yes, perhaps I'll just give you some background on that particular one. That was later in the demonstration after, because what actually happened was the doors didn't open at 10 o'clock, or at least the doors opened, but what they couldn't do was get people in. And I don't know if what happened with a computer system or whatever, but a typical SNP farce. And I was joking away that in fact what the problem was that there was SNP MPs trying to get in, but actually nobody recognised who they were because they had never seen them on the telly before, and that was what the hold-up was. And it might have actually been that, because there was a coterie of SNP MPs at the door standing about looking useless. So it might have been something to do with that. Anyway, they eventually found out that these were SNP MPs, and eventually they started letting people in at 10:30, when in fact the convention had been set to begin anyway. And so that video was taken after sometime between 10 and 10:30, and this group who were on the SNP side decided to stand in front of us with a banner, which has to be the most boring banner in the world. It said, "Let the people decide." Well, I mean, absolutely let the people decide. So we just stood beside them and said, yeah, let the people decide. And if you had let the people decide in 2014, and if you had allowed them their decision, then you wouldn't be carrying on like this, blah blah blah, etc etc. You know what I mean, just riffing on those sorts of themes. And then they tried to stand directly in front of us, so Max got under their banner with the AFFG poster and held it in front of them. So that was quite good. Let's look at one or two photographs of that time also. Here we go. We're going to bring up the photographs, and here's one here. That was when they were beginning to go inside, I think. So they were sort of beginning to move at that point. Here's one SNP Out Now. That's the flag that's in the background. Looking quite good, that I have to say. And here's one of our fantastic activists with our poster, forceforgood.uk, and another fantastic activist here. 660,000 reasons not to vote for independence, with his picture of a camper van. Good. And there's the next one. Now let's put up the next video of us. Just go ahead.
Yes, we're still within the United Kingdom.
What do you want?
Absolutely. And then you've got Keith Brown. Keith Brown!
Yes, sir!
Keith Brown is going to do a talk entitled, "How does a man from Oakle rake in £100,000 a year?" They're using the same old trick. Okay, the same old trick. I'm telling you, guys, that you're going to get so-called separation round the corner. Well, it's not going to happen, folks.
Indeed. So it looks a bit chaotic there, and you can't necessarily hear what I was saying. But what I was saying was I was going through all the people who are going to be speaking at this, and including Keith Brown. And his title of his talk was going to be, "How can a man from Oakle rake in £100,000 a year by repeating the same old trick?" And Jamie Hepburn was going to be next, talking about how thankful he is that the British civil service is not only paying his salary, but paying an entire department to work out how to break up the United Kingdom, and how much he thanks the British civil service, and especially the British taxpayer, for helping him and his department to break up the United Kingdom. And then Mary Black was giving the final speech, or as I said, the farewell speech, which was entitled How an SNP MP Can Prepare for Unemployment in 2024. So you get the kind of gist of the things that, that we were riffing on. Yeah, what a rabble those nationalists are. The word canale comes to mind. Paul says, thank you for defending our country. And Derek Hart says, oh wow, singing the usual trash songs. Shame SNP. Catherine says, brilliant. And it was brilliant work that you and others did. So after we had done that, and once they had eventually gone in, and I had to be very careful what I was saying, of course, as I always say, because I wouldn't want to be accused of elder abuse, you know, so I had to be very, very careful about what I was saying on the microphone. Although I did point out that Humza Yousaf had done quite a good job as far as diversity was concerned, because he was certainly the most diverse person in the hall that day. In fact, he was the only diverse person in the hall that day. That actually got a laugh as well. Anyway, so yeah, let's put up some pictures now of our street stall, because what we then did is we moved across to outside the Overgate Centre. Once all the SNP folk had got in and safely hidden away from all the normal people in Dundee, we went to the Overgate Centre, and there's some nice pictures here which will run up of our street stall. And we were out with our street stall for about 3.5 hours. Okay. Is it good? The dream team, as somebody said. There you go. Okay. There we are. It was an absolutely beautiful day, as you can tell from those photographs. It really was beautiful. Good. Okay. And people were coming up. And a fairly unique thing, I think, really, to see that. I don't think many people had seen the Unionist stall there in Dundee. Okay. And that's good. Okay. With a big Union Jack, Scotland. There you go. Look at that. That was just taken after our chap there on the far right with the red cap and the lady with the big Scotland flag. They decided just to walk around the square at lunchtime when the delegates came out. They just went over and they walked around the square, and you can see the chap there with the camera was doing a live feed, and that was live on our site as well. So it was an exciting day all round. Okay. And then, oh, that's a good. That's one for the magazines. That one. That's excellent. In the summer sun, the AFFG flags flying well. Good. Okay. So, lessons from that. Towards the end, just as the people were going in, I did get the chance to talk to one or two of the SNP people, and there was something that kind of depressed me when I began to think about it. But they did. The person I spoke to, for example, at least 2-3 people were really angry that the English Supreme Court had prevented Holyrood from having a second referendum. And I said to them, no, it's like the United Kingdom Supreme Court. It's not a court set up by the English to dominate Scotland. It's the highest constitutional court in the United Kingdom, and it's made up of judges from Scotland, England, Northern Ireland and Wales, each of whom represent these slightly different legal traditions gathered together, making judgments from their British-wide perspective. And that was, they just would not accept that. And one of them said to me, he goes, well, look, when was the Supreme Court set up? And I goes, well, it was set up on the 1st of October 2009 under Gordon Brown's premiership. And he goes, yeah, it was set up then. And I goes, well, it was only, what they did, I explained, was that previously the court had been located in the House of Lords within the Palace of Westminster. And the judges at that time, the name given to them was Law Lords. And when Blair and Brown came in, they wanted in their minds to clear up this slightly messy circumstance. So what they did was they renovated one of the buildings outside the Palace of Westminster, and they moved the law lords from the rooms in the Houses of Parliament where they would usually adjudge matters. They moved them into a separate court, and they called it the Supreme Court. But the legal tradition was just exactly the same, but they changed the name and they rebranded them. But Britain had had those law lords going way back since the time of Union. But they didn't know anything about that, and they were not accepting it. They were not accepting it. No, this was the Supreme Court that was set up by Gordon Brown, basically to dominate Holyrood and to confound Holyrood to ensure that it doesn't get its way. And I was trying to explain, no, it's nothing to do with that. It's the Constitutional Court of the United Kingdom, and it did not rule against the people of Scotland. It ruled simply that Holyrood, if it was to have a second referendum, would need the permission of the British Parliament to do so. But all of that was just, it was depressing because none of it was accepted, and they were just happy to know it was an English court, and this English court was stopping Scotland getting its way. And you know what? That's the narrative, that's the story that's promoted by the SNP MPs. It's promoted by Humza Yousaf. It's promoted by large elements of the Scottish media. And it's like it doesn't even seem to matter. The truth of the matter is just who's got the loudest bullhorn to promote these sorts of facts. And their angle was much more edgy and much more likely to get people emotional than my angle, which was the reasonable, correct angle about the history of the British Constitutional Court. And that's politics for you, you know. And we've always got to remember that, because sometimes you think, oh, well, we're actually right, historically. But often that can take a backseat simply just to emotional attitudes, and that can be exploited, which is really, really worrying. So there's no level of, there seems to be no level at which that won't happen. So we have to always be careful, always be careful. Now, we've got our guest coming up in 7 minutes. I see that he's in the house already, and we'll be bringing him in at 7:30. But before I do that, let's have our On This Day in British History. And I'll ask you a question afterwards, and the winner will get this tin of sweeties and also this tin of this packet of Royal Air Force Typhoon Display Team coffee. That'll be winging its way to you tomorrow. So stick around, and if you haven't tried this, if you haven't asked a question before, answered a question before, please send in your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk. contact@aforceforgood.uk. Now, what happened on this day, on the 28th of June in 2011? Something quite sad for all us aviation fanatics, but the Hawker Siddeley Nimrod anti-submarine aircraft was officially retired from service, and those of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s will have seen the Nimrod. Many of us saw the Nimrod, some of us even saw it flying over, and it was pretty exciting to see. It was like the big Vulcan as well that you often saw flying over in the skies. And the Nimrod was an absolutely beautiful plane which was introduced in 1967 and was primarily an aerial platform for anti-submarine warfare operations. And it got retired from service. But the good news is that a new fleet of 9 Poseidons were actually introduced, but not until 2020. So between 2011 and 2020, 9 years, Britain didn't have any of that aerial anti-submarine warfare capacity, but we do have them now. At least that's what we're told anyway, if you believe the system. Got a really nice painting here in the office through in one of the other studios, and we'll just bring that up just now. and this is called The Mighty Hunters, this particular picture. There it is there, and that's a Nimrod flying over a Rockall. And in the background there, you might see in the sea, there's a Soviet sub, which is what the Nimrods were always hunting. And in the air there's a little vignette, as it's called, with British troops, which alludes to the Nimrod's tour of duty in Afghanistan as well. And that's a fantastic aircraft. We've got that print in the office here, and that print is by Ronald Wong, who is an aviation artist, and you can buy that as well from his website, from Ronald Wong's website at ronaldtkwong.com. That one's called The Mighty Hunters. Okay. Now, we'll ask you a wee question about that in a minute, folks, and please send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and you can win not only these sweeties, but also the very relevant prize of a Royal Air Force Typhoon display team coffee bag, which we'll chuck in there as well. We've got quite a few of those, which we'll be chucking in with our other prizes. Now let's keep that contact@aforceforgood.uk up there, so that folk who have never tried this can have a go at it. Now let's look at our comments. What have we got here? Derek loves what we did in Dundee. Thank you. Ryan says, if the present voting trajectory continues, then it would suggest the SNP are heading for an electoral hemorrhaging at the next general election. However, if this hemorrhaging comes at the advantage of the Labour Party, we may yet see a revival of successionist politics, for Gordon Brown's constitutional proposals would once again further such an unwanted, egregious agenda. That's so. Now, we wrote an article about their intended plans, the Labour Party's intended plans, and they have lots of ideas for more devolution for Scotland and Wales. And they're also going to abolish the House of Lords and replace it, this is beyond belief, but replace it with a so-called Assembly of the Nations and Regions, which will be elected, and which will, although Gordon Brown says it won't, but it will become an alternative power source to the House of Commons itself, and will just be basically a rival to the House of Commons. Of course it is, because it's going to be another elected body, so of course it's going to be an elected rival. Anyway, as we know from Labour, they never learn, unfortunately. Talking about the article that I wrote about Labour's plans, this person sent a really nice message. Afternoon, Alistair. Hope you and your splendid team are well. I've just read your brilliant demolition of Gordon Brown's New Britain, Renewing Our Democracy. Brown's report is folly. It gives the SNP a lifeline when it is, as you assert, in deep trouble. Thank you so much for this superb demolition job. I hope it gets sent out as widely as possible. So you'll find the links to that, which is entitled A Unionist Eye on Labour's Plans. You'll find the link to that in the comment threads in Twitter and also on Facebook. He continues, I was on holiday recently and I met a lovely couple from Edinburgh, and we got on famously when we discovered our common detestation of the SNP. Great, thank you for sending me that message, sir. And in that regard, Tom Harris wrote this recently in the Telegraph. Scotland is now the testing ground for net zero madness. And he pointed something out which is worth saying, is that virtually every conceivable policy failure of the SNP can be laid at Westminster's door. When this happens, there is far less danger of voters holding ministers accountable for the very real costs. of, for example, their failures. And he points out a counterintuitive consequence of the devolution situation was that was supposed to make decision makers in Scotland more accountable is that it has in certain areas had the opposite effect. So rather than actually making people in politicians in Scotland more accountable, what it has in fact done is just simply allowed them to pass the blame to Westminster and get away scot-free, as the expression has it. Now, let me bring in our guest, but before I bring in the guest, the question I'm asking is that on this day, 28th of June 2011, the Hawker Siddeley aircraft was officially retired from service. What was its name? What was the name of that fantastic aircraft that we saw during the 70s and 80s and 90s as well here in the United Kingdom? Okay. Send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and the first person with the correct answer will get our goodies, and we'll announce the winner at the top of the hour. So folks, please do welcome our guest tonight, which is Niall Fraser.
Hello everyone, I hope you're having a splendid evening.
Good evening, Niall, and yeah, we are having a splendid evening. Thank you so much for coming in tonight, and thank you for all the activism that you did as well at the weekend, because you were busy yourself. You had a good presentation just before we arrived. Actually, you were making your presentation to camera, and we've got that presentation which we'll bring up in a couple of minutes. But do you just want to tell the viewers what was your thinking behind what you did?
Yeah, so
with us?
It was a wee bit of work. It wasn't as much work as you put in, Alistair. I'll grant you that. You were absolutely on fire at the weekend. So, I mean, we both went up to Dundee, me and your fine self, over the weekend, where, you know, Hapless, Humza Useless was having his party's big let's waste everyone's time convention. I mean, we know that the SNP have moved nowhere closer to their so-called goal of independence over almost an entire decade. And even in actuality, they've moved further and further away from their goal, further away from voters, further away from normal Scots, and further away from reality, whether reality bending GRR stuff. So when I was in Dundee with you, I had a novel thought, you know. I had the idea for Scotland's new currency, because the SNP, I mean, love them or hate them, they can't come up with any ideas for the new currency. So I thought I would step in and present a currency that the SNP are very, very familiar with. Some would say the SNP have been using this currency for years and years, and it's called the brown envelope. So if you want to bring up the video, that would be perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll bring up that video of the brown envelope. The brown envelope.
Here we are in Dundee at Caird Hall, where there's an independence convention brought to you by Humza Yousaf and the SNP. Although, after all these years, they still don't know what the currency is going to be. But that's fine, because I know the answer. It's been staring us in the face all this time. I mean, the SNP want to push the envelope, but they're actually, I mean, why not literally push envelopes? Brown envelopes full of cash. Why not? This is the currency of the future, guys. This, without brown envelopes, guys, Scottish industry would grind to a halt. These envelopes lubricate the gears of industry here in Scotland. We don't know who these names belong to, but, you know, Little Miss Sleekit, Mr. Weather. I mean, I just picked these up from SNP HQ. I have no idea who these names pertain to. No idea. No idea. No idea. No idea. Maybe if you know who they are, maybe you have a suspicion on who they are. But the thing is, the SNP are actually destroying Scotland. They are, with brown envelopes and corruption. When we asked the SNP to push the envelope, we didn't mean it literally. And, you know, before you start, we trialled white envelopes. We really did. But Humza despises anything white, so we had to go with the brown envelopes, guys. So this is me, Niall Fraser, reporting from Independence Convention.
Oh, God.
Fantastic.
Yep, so you would have understood the idea behind the whole thing. I've got some of the envelopes here, so if a wee treat for your viewers, Force for Good viewers, you tell me in the comments who these envelopes pertain to. So this one, Kit Kat, if you can guess who that is.
Okay.
Useless. I don't think
that's an easy one.
Much. I think that is an easy one. Captain Pugwash. This might take a wee bit of thought. Steak Bake. Code name Steak Bake.
I think I know that one.
So that's about all. We've got Mr. Leather as well, I can see. But effectively what we did, took these envelopes and we stuffed them full of fake cash to make it look real.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, I've missed a trick, basically. You know, originally, we wanted to get the footage of me handing Humza a brown envelope. But, of course, he's timidly shuffled into the back door of the Caird Hall, Alistair. Can you believe this? I mean, if you were, imagine being the First Minister and having to skulk around Scotland like a criminal. It's weird. I mean, imagine coming in the back door of places. It's wild. And again, a few things about the weekend actually annoyed me, but it's only through hindsight that you notice these things. But, you know, we should have had a stall set up selling burner phones, Alistair. We missed a massive trick there. We would have sold hundreds of burner phones. They would have been going like hotcakes. And we should have had a big sandwich board, or at least I should have had one that says, I would like to buy politicians. And then walking about the Independence Convention. It would have been fantastic. But equally, I mean, my efforts were totally unmatched by yourself. It was amazing to see yourself, amazing to witness it, causing absolute carnage simply by stating facts and your marvellous megaphone usage. So all credit to you, Alistair. And again, it's not an easy thing to do. Just walk right into the lion's den and start, you know, preaching the truth. But you certainly have the courage, my friend. I mean, overall, just before you come in, overall, it was a really, really fantastic weekend. We managed to have a good laugh. I think the Hapless Humza's Wasted Time convention was overshadowed by your work, my work. But if not by any of us, there was a woman in the Independence Convention who basically stopped the whole thing, who was a victim of this Surgeon El Jamel at NHS Tayside. So that overshadowed the whole event. And he actually stopped the convention to address this woman and then starts putting his hands all over, basically saying, going, shush, it's my show, hen, please. So it was a horrible thing to say, to see rather, because the woman is clearly distressed in the whole situation. But yes. Again, I have to commend you and your courage, Alistair. There was a wee bit of, so you described it as chaos earlier on, but it was organised chaos.
Yes, it absolutely was. Well, you get used to doing things. It's quite easy to do it once you do it. But what I like about your stuff is you're always very thoughtful. You're always coming up with clever little stunts and ideas that's a gift that you've got. You know, a lot of people don't have that. I don't really have that sort of mind, but you've definitely got it. So good for that. This chap says, Captain Pugwash, is that Alex Salmond?
Oh, that's not who I had in mind. That's not who I had in mind.
Okay, well, don't tell us.
Nope.
If anybody knows who Captain Pugwash is in the SNP, tell us. If anybody knows who Steak Bake is, I think that's surely an easy one.
Yeah.
And if anybody knows who Kit Kat is, you need to. I guess you need to be kind of in on these things. You need to be following social media to know. And Useless, obviously, we know who that is. Stuart says Humza wore a new tie.
Did he?
I didn't notice, but that certainly makes a good. Folks on TikTok, you won't see this interview because it's not being viewed on TikTok, but you'll see us on youtube.com/UK, a force for good.
The Stuart McDonald's got the first one. Steak, bake, Blackford, yes. That's one down. Still got Captain Pugwash, Kit Kat.
There you go. Yeah, Stuart's got that. D Stanners has got Kit Kat.
Of course.
Mary Black. Yeah.
See, the captain. Nobody's getting the Captain Pugwash one. Nobody's getting that. It's not who I'm imagining. Angus Robertson.
No, it's not. Okay. Cool.
Cool. But I mean, you see what I'm trying to do with these stunts, so Alistair. It's all about trying to make the public think. And if you, again, I'm trying to display something at the same time. I'm saying, well, it's dual prong. One, they've not got a currency. This whole time, 10 plus years of planning, Alistair, more than 10 years of planning, and they've still not got a currency plan. They don't know. So I'm pointing that out in the first instance, and then I'm pointing at just the blatant levels of corruption we've got here in Scotland as well. So I mean, why do we not just bring in the brown envelope? I mean, it's almost a joke saying these lubricate the gears of the industry. These keep Scotland going. But you know, there's an element of truth in that, and that's why it's a good joke. I think everyone knows that there's a huge level of corruption here in Scotland. It's just about pinning it on the party. Everyone seems it's definitely Westminster, it's definitely Holyrood or whatever. You know, that seems to be the argument in Scotland now. And I did have a conversation with a few independent supporters during this weekend.
And tell us about
know, well, most of them, the ones that were standing outside Caird Hall, I was banging on about the SNP, and they're saying, well, it's only part of the independence. I said, well, it's absolutely not. So I can, and a lot of these people really dislike the SNP as well, but they just see it as the only bridge towards their idea of independence. And this is why the SNP have gotten away with what they've gotten away with all this time. Because they seem to have the... well, they've got their voters tied up. They've got them round their finger. They've nowhere to go, really. And they can basically monster their own voters time and time again, and they'll just have to come back. They would just physically have to come back. So I think we're almost at a turning point where even their own supporters, you mentioned the diminishing numbers and stuff like that, they're going to diminish to such a degree that there'll be no money left, there'll be no big conventions anymore, and it's all just sadly going to go away. Well, not sadly for us, but sadly for them. It's going to be the last one that put the lights out situation, I think, with SNP.
That's an interesting analysis. I hope that you're right there. I would say about your stunts, for example, these are stunts that can be done again as well. And you didn't get Humza going in this time, but you know there'll be another time when you will get him on that. So you know, keep all your stunt stuff together. Don't throw it out, because these things can be recycled, and Scotland's all about recycling, as they say. Now, Stuart says, is it Ken Brown? I think you mean
Ken
Keith
Brown. No. Think more senior position than that, Stuart. The most senior, almost.
Crikey. Okay, good. Now, did you learn anything because I noticed you did speak to one or two of the SNP people outside. I mean, what was your...
Well, initially, there was almost a fight broke out, wasn't there? So, after the situation had quelled, I wanted to go and speak to the guy who's obviously animated enough to try to start a fight with someone.
If I can just quickly butt in there, we've got that video footage on one of our action cams, but I haven't gone through it yet. But this is a guy who just lost his head and came up to one of our people, just like straight in for a fight. And this is an older guy who's like in his probably 60s, right? He's not a 14-year-old teenager. And he needs to be, he needs to sort himself out, because he's an angry old man, and you shouldn't be getting to 60 and still be angry. You know, that's something you can go through at teenage years and whatever. But not when you're 60 years old. Anyway, and there were several of those as well. And one guy was saying he was wanting to start a fight with me. And I goes, look, mate, you're a fully grown man.
Yeah.
And he goes, I know I'm a fully grown man.
I mean, it's crazy, isn't it, Alistair?
Yeah. And so anyway, this guy comes up to one of ours. I stood in the way of him to stop him, and then there was a couple of coppers that were hanging about, which was good, and they just took him away and gave him a talking to. But he still went into the conference. But you're saying you went up and spoke to him?
Yeah, I went up and spoke to him. I actually held him outside the conference for a long time. So the guy, I mean, again, I'm like, what in this guy's mind has made him start a fight with another Scot over total nonsense, right? So this guy, he, first of all, he's saying Westminster's corrupt, and I'm saying, well, yes, I agree. He says, well, what are we fighting about? I'm saying, well, Horrid's also corrupt. And do you not think that we should clean up our own back garden before we go pointing fingers elsewhere? And that seems to be the line that set him free. That seems to be the thought process that I managed to persuade him round to, is that, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Rishi Sunak and the Westminster Tory government, not at all. But likewise, we can't point fingers at them without pointing fingers at ourselves in Scotland as well. And that's what SNP voters need to start thinking about, is actually, let's look at ourselves for a minute. What have we done? Everything seems to be getting worse up here. And it can't all be down to Westminster. I mean, a lot of them will still claim that, but a lot of it can't literally not be. So I think pointing that out to independent supporters that you're not the biggest fan of Westminster almost gets you a wee in. I mean, it starts the conversation. So once you've started the conversation, then you can start to wind them in and say, well, actually, you know, the SNP are quite corrupt as well. Or, you know, this whole time, Holyrood has been acting crazy. I mean, all the money that's been spent on ferries, and we've not even got 2 floating vessels yet. I mean, I'm just calling that corruption straight up. But it's important to sort of throw cold water on this dialogue. That's what I was trying to do up there, Alistair, is that there was a lot of people on fever pitch, a lot of people, blood's running high, that we just need to throw cold water on it for a second, just slow down and have a conversation, because we're not too far away. We aren't. It's just that we've had successive Tory governments that people are very sick of, and that's just, I think it's positioned SNP voters to be more entrenched, and I think the longer this goes on, the more entrenched they'll become. But it's important to try to throw cold water on it and talk these people down off the ledge, almost as it were.
Yeah, good point. You know, that's a very good insight, and I agree with that. You definitely would. We do not want to be positioned to be seen as somehow defending the behaviour of MPs, and this is something that I'm always at pains to emphasise, is that as pro-UK Unionist people, we don't support the UK because of the politicians per se. We support the ideal of the United Kingdom, the ideal of all the people of these islands working together in as much unity and solidarity as we can muster, rubbing along where we can't necessarily work together, but not at each other's throats. And the centuries have brought us to the situation that we're in just now, which is the United Kingdom, which is the best way we've found of rubbing along together. For example, as I actually said on the megaphone, I said, what you guys want to do is you want to break us up, and then the very next day you want to approach what's left of the United Kingdom, and then you want to figure out how best can we cooperate economically and legally and diplomatically and militarily and socially and culturally. Well, that's what we're doing right now. You know, this you want to break it in order to build it back up again. You don't make something better by breaking it and then the very next day trying to glue it back together again. We've already got a system of cooperation, and we've even got a name for it. It's called the United Kingdom. So let's stick with what we've got and try to make that better. And that was one of the messages that I tried to get across. And I think that's a fairly good message, really, in many ways.
Certainly resonates with a lot of people, Alistair.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people think Unionists, oh, you support Tory government. Oh no, wait, so you automatically condone every single action Westminster actually has? No.
Yeah. Well, we get that a lot on all our social media
course.
channels every day. Oh, you're Tories. You support the Tories. It's just, and you have to say, well, no, we support the United Kingdom. We don't necessarily support the politicians. Is it Colin Beattie, Captain Pugwash?
No. So so Captain Pugwash alludes everyone. I'll let people know at the end if nobody's got it by then. But even more senior than Colin Beattie. He was a signatory on the
Oh, I know
accounts.
who you mean. That's giving it away. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be interested to know why you are calling that person that name.
I don't know.
When you explain it.
I always
Stuart
it's not
says
funny, no.
Swinny, no.
Although he's a good candidate, actually, Stuart. He could also be Pugwash.
Yeah, did you have an envelope for him?
No, for Swinney. I mean,
I call him
had some Swindler.
I call him Slender Man because there's a kind of horrific US.
I know what you're talking about. The game, comes and gets you in the forest.
Yeah, the guy that gets you in the forest, and I always think Swinney looks like Slender Man.
There we go. Catherine's getting it. Peter.
Catherine Vaney says Peter.
Yes.
Mr. Morrell. Yeah. Why did you give him that moniker?
I always thought, he's got the most Captain Pugwash look about him. I think if you Google Pugwash, baldy sort of captain, he just looks very, very similar, I think.
Right. Yeah. I guess so. Yeah. Well, as I say, I spoke to one person outside. Well, I spoke to three actually, but two of them were going at me about how the Supreme Court was an English court and this English law was overriding Scottish law, and that's something I'm going to need to kind of lay out one of these days. But that's confusing. That's confusing two things entirely, because Scotland and England have slightly different legal traditions.
Yeah, of course.
That doesn't mean that the British Parliament can't make law for all the United Kingdom together. Of course it can, and that law, if it's broken in one part of the United Kingdom, will be adjudged either by a Scottish court or an English court, and they'll look at it through their particular historical lens. But the differences are not that much, and the British Parliament does make British law, but the legal system itself, if you get a job as a lawyer, in England you'll be studying predominantly English law, and in Scotland you'll be studying Scottish law. But that's one of these things that confuses people, and it's one of these kind of British quirks. But it's certainly not right to say that, as many of them do, that the British Parliament's an English Parliament that makes English law that shouldn't apply in Scotland. That's just completely crazy.
Absolutely, our court.
Exactly. Yes. Catherine says that Peter Morrell looks like Penfold.
Oh, Penfold would have been a great one, Catherine. You should have wrote the code names. Penfold is a perfect one for Peter.
Yes.
But we do plan on doing more of these things. Like you said, I've got quite an imagination for stunts. I think we want to get, we want to infiltrate where the SNP are and dissuade their voters away from them in real time.
Yeah.
Right as they're standing in front of them. Because I think people are coming away from the SNP. Really, they're starting to lose their rose-tinted glasses. They've taken them off.
Absolutely. Well, let's stay in touch about that Now, Niall, let me just remind the viewers and the listeners of your Substack, which is Niall Fraser. Now that's NIALLFRASER 8, niallfraser8.substack.com, and you put articles on there occasionally. You're also got a Twitter, which is twitter.com/NiallFraser8, and you have got a Ko-fi.com. Now what this is people can go to that and they can metaphorically, I think is the word, buy you a coffee, and that's ko-fi.com/Niall Fraser8. And as I say, that's Niall, Niall, and Fraser, Fraser.
So most active on Twitter. That's the best place to get me, really. If you feel like supporting me, please do. But if you don't, then just send us a wee message.
A wee message, because wee messages of hope are always
they go
morale raisers. Absolutely. But if you want to stick in a couple of quid, there you go. It's ko-fi.com/Niall Fraser8. Now let's have you on again as soon as we can, and let's stay in touch. And thank you very much.
Pleasure for having me, Alistair. You'll have seen that I've picked up my own wee Force for Good badge, managed to put it on for the show.
Fantastic.
So it finally came, and it came pretty quickly as well, but absolutely beautiful. So I thought I would honour it this evening.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you. We'll put the link up for our little AFFG Union Heart Badge as well, which you'll see in the comment thread. Okay, so Niall, we'll say goodbye for now, and we'll have you back on, and we'll be joining you, no doubt, in Activism.
Okay, goodbye for now, Alistair. Goodbye
Take
for
care.
now.
Cheers. Fantastic. Niall Fraser, fantastic activist and a great thinker. Good. Stuart says, thanks, Niall. And it's an excellent badge. Isn't it just an excellent badge? Christopher says, thank you, Niall, for all your contributions. And he adds that the Supreme Court is another benefit beyond the Court of Session. That's right, it's a higher court. It's the highest court for civil law in the United Kingdom. Derek says, brilliant show. And thanks to our guest this evening. Now, I want to mention that we're going to be out twice in the next 10 days. On Saturday, we are going to have a street stall in George Square in Glasgow from 9:30 in the morning until noon. So please do say hello to us there. That's 9:30 to noon this Saturday, the 1st of July. And then on Wednesday, the 5th of July, we're going to be in Edinburgh because King Charles is coming to St. Giles Cathedral, where he is going to be presented with the honours of Scotland, the crown, the sword and the sceptre of Scotland, which is something that is done after the coronation. And so it's a big day in Edinburgh on Wednesday, the 5th of July. And if you'd like to join us, AFFG will have quite a few of our supporters there as well. And we'll have some King Charles flags and things like that. So if you'd like to join us, please do contact us at aforceforgood.uk. And we have a winner. Let's check if we've got a winner with our event. We have a winner. Fantastic. We asked on this day which British aircraft was decommissioned and the answer was Nimrod, and the winner is Debbie Beer. Well done, Debbie. Good for you. This will be winging its way to you if we don't see you in the near future. Good stuff. Derek says we need an extended show when you've got great guests on. Thanks for that. Paul says we need workshops on how to communicate with SNP supporters, tactics on how to de-escalate conflicts. Good point, Paul. That's a good point. Stuart says have a beer to celebrate Debbie. Debbie says she'll get it on Wednesday. That means you're coming to Edinburgh. Great stuff, Debbie. We'll see you there, hopefully with other AFFG supporters, and we'll bring along your prize. Fantastic. Enjoy the coffee and sweeties, but don't combine them. Debbie might like a case of beer instead. Some British beer, I think, is what we need. Kathleen says, congratulations, Debbie. Wonderful. Now I just want to check my notes to see that I haven't missed out anything that I needed to say today. A lot of stuff we never got covered because we had such a fantastic guest and because we were talking about everything that we had been doing last Saturday. But as I say, we'll be back out this Saturday and also on Wednesday in Edinburgh, so we may see you then. Folks, we're not going to be broadcasting next Wednesday. Okay, we're not going to be broadcasting because it's the King's visit and we'll be in Edinburgh and it'll be too much of a rush to get back to Glasgow. And so we won't be broadcasting next Wednesday. But we will see you the following Wednesday, the 12th, when we will also have another guest, a new guest, if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise. Okay, folks, it just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next time.